You're tuned in to Arirang TV's special coverage of the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit in Pyeongyang. We're glad to have you with us. Live in Seoul, I'm Devin Whiting, and I'm joined by two experts on inter-Korean relations. Dr. Pyeongyang of the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. Dr. Bong, thanks for making time tonight.
Pleased to be here.
And our very own Kim Min-ji, our political correspondent. Thank you, Min-ji.
Thanks very, very much.
We'll be right back to both of you in just a bit after we get the latest updates from the main press center in downtown Seoul. That's where President Moon ended his historic trip to North Korea with a surprise briefing for the South Korean people. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun was at the press center then, and he joins us now. Ho-jun, the summit is now over. The world is digesting all of what they've seen over the past few days and what they heard this evening from President Moon. Tell us what he said.
Well, Devin, just about an hour after President Moon landed at Seoul Air Base, he actually stopped by, as you said, he stopped by the Seoul Media Press Center set here at the Dongdaemun Design Plaza. And he actually stood on the podium that you see right behind me, and he basically briefed not just the press but the entire South Korean people on the results of his three-day visit to Pyongyang for the summit with his North Korean counterpart. He said he sees his 3 days visit to Pyongyang as a significant advancement of trust between the two Koreas. He first thanked the North Korean leader and the citizens of Pyongyang for their heartfelt hospitality and said he held deep and sincere conversations with Kim Jong-un on topics including denuclearization and the Pyongyang-Washington relationship. President Moon vouched for Kim Jong-un's determination to denuclearize, to accomplish that as soon as possible, and focus on his country's economic development. He underscored some of the main points of the Pyongyang Declaration, namely North Korea expressing its willingness to take additional measures such as the permanent dismantlement of the nuclear facilities in Yongbyon as the U.S. takes, quote, corresponding measures. Devin, when President Moon was asked about what exactly the corresponding measures mean, he said while there were oral agreements made between the two leaders, it would be appropriate to disclose them to the press at this moment, and that the, quote, corresponding measures are something that must be discussed between North Korea and the U.S., which is why he said the Pyongyang Declaration did not include those steps in detail. So we will have to wait and see what kind of message President Moon will relay to his U.S. counterpart next week on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly.
All right, got it, Ho-jun. President Moon's briefing, though, at the press center was not on the schedule until really the last minute, so that must have caused a commotion there.
That's right. As you can see, the buzz has died down right now since many of the reporters actually returned home after filing their reports on President Moon's visit to Pyongyang, as well as his briefing here at the Design Plaza, this whole media press center. Now, just to refresh your memory, this is the first time that the president has come to the press center to address reporters after a summit. For the first one in April, he did not stop by the press center at Kintex. And for the second one, when he met with Kim Jong-un behind closed doors, he did brief the public, but only a day after the fact. Now, it's also not common for the president to take unscripted questions either, which is why the venue packed with more than 2,700 reporters, not just from Korea, but also from 29 other countries. They were all eagerly waving their hands, raising their hands to ask questions in person, including myself. The decision to hold an unscripted Q&A session basically proves that President Moon was very confident and he was satisfied with the results of his three-day summit in Pyongyang. Devin?
Yeah, quite the ending to the summit and quite the ending for a week of hard work out there by you, Ho-jun. Thanks for that. Now, President Moon Jae-in said the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is ready to take more steps towards denuclearization, but the condition is that there have to be corresponding measures from the United States. Shin Se-min reports.
His first stop after returning from his three-day trip to the north, the main press center in Seoul. Addressing the nation on the outcome of the historic Pyongyang summit, President Moon Jae-in said he was assured by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un that he is determined to completely denuclearize his regime at the earliest date possible and focus on its economy. And he said the North is ready to speed things up on denuclearization depending on steps from the U.S.
북미 정상회담에서 합의한 4개 합의 사항이 함께 이행되어야 하므로 미국이 그 정신에 따라 상응하는 조치를 취해 준다면 영변 핵시설의 영구적 폐기를 포함한 추가적인 비핵화 조치를 계속 취해 나갈 용의가 있음을 표명하였습니다.
And those steps would be determined, said the president, in talks between North Korea's Kim and U.S. President Donald Trump, which he hopes will happen soon. And on the issue of how to put an official end to the Korean War, the president said he and his North Korean counterparts have the same idea.
비핵화의 어떤 구체적인 방안 또는 그에 대한 또 상응 조치 이런 부분들은 기본적으로 북미 간에 논의될 그런 내용입니다. 그래서 남북 간에 논의한 내용 가운데 합의 문안에 어느 정도 또 어떤 표현으로 담을 것인가 라는 데 그 논의를 많이 했었고
The president then said a peace treaty with the North will follow after complete denuclearization. And he said the military agreement reached by the two Koreas has created the conditions for a swift resumption of talks between Pyongyang and Washington. President Moon has done his part by bringing his North Korean counterparts another step forward in the process of denuclearization. Now the question is when and what sort of corresponding measures will be drawn out from the U.S., something that could possibly come out during the talks between Presidents Moon and Trump in New York next week. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, President Moon got to fulfill a lifelong wish this morning with a visit to Baekdusan Mountain, the highest peak on the Korean peninsula. He was invited there by Kim Jong-un. Unlike most outside visitors who have to go up the mountain from the Chinese side, President Moon was on Korean soil the whole time. Park Hee-jun reports.
They held their hands up together at the peak of Baekdusan Mountain. South Korean President Moon Jae-in, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and the First Ladies ascended the iconic mountain on the last day of the Pyeongyang summit, the last stop on their schedule before returning to Seoul. A deeply meaningful day, especially for President Moon, who got to tick off a wish on his bucket list.
이 백두산 부음이 있어서 우리 사람들이 중국 쪽으로 백두산을 많이 갔습니다. 지금도 뭐 많이 가고 있습니다만 그때 나는 중국으로 가지 않겠다. 반드시 우리 땅으로 백두산을 오르겠다. 그렇게 이제 다짐을 했었는데 그런 세월이 금방 올 것 같으니 멀어졌어요. 그래서 이게 뭐 백두산 영 모르나 하고 걱정했는데 드디어 소원을 이뤘습니다.
The two leaders shared their hopes for a new era in which South Koreans will be able to freely come and go to Baekdusan.
오늘은 뭐 적은 인원이 양쪽 대다수원들한테 앞으로 이 길로 양쪽 인민들 해외 동포들 와서 백두산을 봐야지. 분단 이후에 남쪽에서는 그저 바라만 보면 그리움의 산이 됐으니까.
Also at the mountain was the South Korean delegation accompanying President Moon. They and the president invited Kim Jong-un to South Korea's Hallasan Mountain on Jeju Island in return for the special tour. It was cold, but the sky was perfectly clear.
아리랑 스리스리랑 아리랑
And with their symbolic mountain trek, the leaders of the two Koreas concluded their three-day inter-Korean summit. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, Baekdusan is important to President Moon, and it's important to the people of both Koreas. In fact, it's part of the Korean nation's founding myth, as our Oh Soo-young explains.
The sacred Baekdusan mountain on the northernmost point of the peninsula has once again been highlighted as the symbol of Korean identity after President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un's visit following their summit talks this week. Meaning Whitehead Mountain in Korean, Baekdusan is the highest mountain on the peninsula and in northeast China with a height of 2,744 meters. It has had a major role in Korean history, stretching back more than 5,000 years. It's the birthplace of Tangun, the legendary founder of Korea, who ruled for some 1,500 years according to myths. He first established his capital in the city of Pyeongyang before turning into a mountain god. This story and various other Baekdusan fables have inspired a sense of national identity and the noble spirit of the Korean people, depicting the mountain's tall mystical peaks and its Cheonji crater lake. North Korea's ruling Kim family has even claimed to be descended from the so-called Baekdu bloodline, a move seen as an attempt to legitimize its leadership over 3 generations. With its historical significance still alive in both present-day Koreas, the South and North during the 2007 summit agreed to run tours to the mountain and establish a direct air route from Seoul, but the plan was never carried out. And during the April summit in Panmunjom this year, President Moon expressed his wish to visit Baekdusan Mountain and see its crater lake, Lake Cheonji, from the Korean side and not the Chinese side. Kim appears to have taken note, inviting Moon on a trip to the mountain on the last day of his Pyongyang visit. Many observers believe this indicates a positive move towards cooperation, as the two Koreas set out to overcome decades of military tension and frosty relations. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
In the United States, meanwhile, President Trump did not hesitate to praise the latest summit. He called it good news and said there's been tremendous progress. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, too, is moving ahead with talks with his North Korean counterpart next week. Lee Seung-jae has this report.
Speaking to reporters at the White House on Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump praised the inter-Korean summit, adding the agreements reached between the two leaders in which the North said it would permanently abolish its key missile facilities with witnesses as being very good news.
We had very good news from North Korea, South Korea. They met and we had some great responses. I got a tremendous letter from Kim Jong-un. As you know, it was delivered 3 days ago. We're making tremendous progress with respect to North Korea.
The U.S. leader also talked about the progress being made with North Korea, putting an emphasis on the ending of missile and nuclear testing.
Prior to becoming president, it looked like we were going to war with North Korea, and now we have a lot of progress. We've gotten our prisoners back. We're getting our remains back. They continue to come in. A lot of tremendous things, but very importantly, no missile testing, no nuclear testing. Now they want to go and put a bid in for the Olympics. No, we have a lot of very good things going.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. is prepared to immediately engage in talks with North Korea in the wake of this week's inter-Korean summit. The top U.S. diplomat said in a statement that the U.S. congratulates the leaders of the two Koreas on the successful outcome of their meeting in Pyeongyang and welcomed the North Korean leaders' reaffirmation to denuclearize the peninsula. Pompeo says he has invited his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho to meet him in New York next week on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, where they are both scheduled to be in attendance. He also said the U.S. has invited Pyongyang officials to meet with the new U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, in Vienna at the earliest opportunity. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
A lot of focus has been on what Washington thinks about what happened in Pyongyang this week, but other countries in the region, namely China, Russia, and Japan, have their own views, and they've welcomed the summit. They also want peace. Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
South and North Korea's neighboring countries of China, Japan, and Russia gave their responses to the third inter-Korean summit of 2018. The Chinese government said it welcomes the dialogue on Wednesday, the day when the two Koreas signed a joint statement as well as a military agreement to reduce tensions.
As a close neighbor, China always supports improvements in inter-Korean relations through dialogue. China hopes the two Koreas can actively implement the consensus made in their joint declaration and make continuous efforts to play a positive role toward achieving long-standing peace in the region.
Meanwhile, Japan says it hopes improved inter-Korean relations could lead to the resumption of denuclearization dialogue between North Korea and the U.S. It also called for specific actions from the North for the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. In a regular briefing, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshida Suga called for North Korea to promptly carry out its denuclearization efforts as agreed upon by the two Koreas, as well as the agreements made during the Singapore summit in June. Japan says it hopes for a separate summit between North Korea and Japan, saying it's communicating through various channels in South Korea and Japan to make it happen, but nothing is settled as of now. Russia, another former member of the six-party denuclearization talks, says it welcomes the signing of the military agreement between the two Koreas. Russia's presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Moscow considers the move an effective step towards settling issues regarding North Korea's nuclear program. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
One other thing to come out of the agreements this week, if it happens, that would be unprecedented. Kim Jong-un said he would try to visit Seoul soon, possibly this year. Hong Yoo explains.
나는 문재인 대통령에게 가까운 시일 안에 서울을 방문할 것을 약속했습니다.
With that, the North Korean leader hinted at a possible visit to the South Korean capital. He made the announcement at the press briefing that followed the signing of the Pyeongyang joint agreement on Wednesday. And his plans to visit South were also included in that agreement made between the two leaders. President Moon added that the visit is likely to take place within this year. If Kim does make the trip, he will be the first North Korean leader to visit Seoul, and that would be a landmark moment for inter-Korean relations. During the 2000 Inter-Korean Summit, then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il had also promised then South Korean President Kim Dae-jung that he would visit South Korea. But that plan fell apart. At the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit, when the two Koreas reached the October 4th agreement, Kim Jong-il only agreed to constantly meet to discuss pending problems without any promises to make a trip to Seoul. Therefore, Kim's announcement came as a surprise.
I was talking with an important figure from the Unification Front Department, and according to him, everyone was against Kim Jong-un visiting Seoul. So it was solely Kim's decision, and no one was able to stop him. It looks like they are really worried.
Kim Jong-un's decision to visit Seoul, despite all the opposition, hints at his willingness to take the inter-Korean relations a step further, and that the visit may actually happen this time. Hong Yoo, Arirang News.
This was, of course, the third time the leaders of South and North Korea have met this year, all in the space of 5 months. And they certainly appear to have developed a friendship. And in that spirit, Kim Jong-un and his regime gave President Moon a very stately welcome, as our Lee Min-sun reports.
The third Inter-Korean Summit of the year and fifth in history was held in Pyeongyang this week and was filled with many first and unexpected events. Notable differences were first seen at Pyeongyang International Airport upon President Moon's arrival on Tuesday. The way he was greeted by North Korea differed a lot from the welcoming ceremonies laid on for former South Korean presidents Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun in 2000 and 2007 respectively. After Moon was greeted personally by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and his wife Lee Seol-ju, North Korean soldiers and naval officials fired a 21-gun salute to honor the South Korean head of state. At the previous two summits, a salute was omitted due to the nature of inter-Korean relations at the time. Thousands of North Koreans greeted President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un as they shared an open top car ride through downtown Pyeongyang. In 2007, then South Korean President Roh Moo-hyun made the same journey in an open top car with Kim Young-nam, the president of the Presidium of the Supreme People's Assembly of North Korea, but not with then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. But it's notable that this time, President Moon rode with Chairman Kim, the man in ultimate charge of the regime. There were other differences throughout the second and third day. President Moon made a rare visit to a local seafood restaurant and interacted with North Korean public. He also gave a speech at the mass games on Wednesday night, being the first South Korean leader to do so. Chairman Kim accompanied President Moon for the most of the itinerary, and the two leaders had many chances for private conversations. They extended their time together by hiking up Baekdusan Mountain on Thursday morning before President Moon's return to South Korea. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
And we're back with our two experts here in the studio, Dr. Bong Young-sik and Arirang's very own Kim Min-ji. Let's start with the very end of the summit. That was President Moon coming back and giving a press briefing in Seoul at the end of the day, telling the world and the South Korean people about what he did there in the north. What struck me about the whole thing really was how quickly the topic of the United States came up. President Moon mentioned it in his remarks about what he had discussed. You know, it was a topic that obviously, for obvious reasons, was not brought up in public while President Moon was in North Korea. So it was the first chance for him to talk about it and for reporters to hear about it.
Well, the United States was an elephant in the room. When President Moon Jae-in was having meetings with the chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea, it was apparent that there was a third leader in the room, which was the U.S. President Donald Trump. So whatever agreement or disagreement they might have had between themselves, it was not unrelated to the likely response from Washington. Every inter-Korean agreements should be in parallel with the U.S. blueprint to bring sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula, but at the same time achieving final and fully verified denuclearization of North Korea. So although the magic word, the United States, was not really mentioned while President Moon Jae-in was physically inside North Korea, but that was a magic word that both leaders must have kept in their heads all the time.
For sure. And in respect to what President Moon said about the United States, even today there were certain areas that he could not talk about in this address. But he did say that South and North Korea have the same idea about ending the war, but North Korea and the United States is another question entirely.
Right, but Moon Jae-in made it really clear that that issue should be dealt between North Korea and the United States as well. Ending the war officially and permanently on the Korean Peninsula since the signing of the Armistice Agreement to suspend the Korean War, not officially ended the Korean War on the 27th of July 1953. Is not only a business between the two Koreas, but also something that must be struck between the United States and North Korea as still former and current present adversaries. So, but as National Security Advisor in the President's office, Mr. Jung Eui-yong, and President Moon Jae-in himself reiterated that there's a lot of very important substances left out of the letter of the joint statement issued in Pyongyang this time. So the main basic message that President Moon Jae-in was delivering to the reporters gathered in the press center today after his return from North Korea is that very first dramatic first season of this opera.
Okay.
And stay tuned. There will be season 2. But this time the main protagonist do not include me. It'll be Mr. Kim and Mr. Chung.
Very interesting. Let's get back to season 2 of that drama in just a second. Minji, we were talking earlier. The idea of how the peace process goes forward and when the Korean War can be formally declared over, in contrast with what can be done between the two Koreas themselves.
So they've said that they want to declare an end to a war as soon as possible, and that's probably possible. They want to achieve it before the year's end. And there has been some, he said there has been some miscommunication over the term itself. He addressed it today at the presser and saying that the concept that we refer to when we declare the end of war is more of like a political declaration and ending it. And when it comes to signing a peace treaty, that would only happen when North Korea achieves complete denuclearization.
So that's still relatively far out there into the future if it does happen. He also mentioned, President Moon mentioned the U.S. military presence in South Korea. That's something he doesn't think is relevant to what's going on now.
Yes, he did note that many in South Korea and the U.S. fear that the move, by declaring an end of a war, it may weaken the South Korea and the U.S. alliance because we are keeping tens of thousands of U.S. troops in South Korea. But he did reassure that it's more of a political declaration, like I said, and it's the first step to ending the hostile relationship and providing security guarantees, and that it won't involve the signing of a peace treaty. right at the moment.
Because South Korea, the Republic of Korea, is allies with the United States, irrespective of other factors, it's for security. Got it.
That's right.
Well, making a distinction there, you know, talking about the United States, again, a reporter asked President Moon, noted that there must be differences between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, and President Moon knows what they are.
No, there's no daylight between the two allies. That's the official, you know, rhetoric for both sides.
I'm sorry, not between the allies, but between that President Moon, being the interlocutor between these two, would know what the issues are.
Well, President Trump tweeted, and as you saw on the TV report, that he praised the summit meeting and its outcomes, and he emphasized that his meeting with Mr. Kim Jong-un in Singapore on June 12th is very successful despite the domestic criticisms. He emphasized that there has not been further missile tests or nuclear tests by North Korea. So we are free from the terror of North Korea's provocation. The nation is safe, and our war heroes, their remains are coming back in the meantime. And North Korea just pledged to possible, expert inspections on the Dongchangri site, dismantlement. So according to Trump's own vision, that things are moving in the right direction, albeit a little slower than anticipated. So he would like to package everything in a very positive and successful light for his own political interest.
Sure.
But at the same time, he is also very well aware that North Korea's promises of complete denuclearization has not been carried out as fast as he thought North Koreans promised at the Singaporean summit meeting, which led to his decision to stop his Secretary of State, Mr. Mike Pompeo, to make another visit to Pyongyang, which really delayed the original schedule espoused by Pyongyang and Seoul, that, okay, we are going to have Secretary Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang, and we will get the major concessions from the United States. And taking advantage of that, we will have a very successful third summit meeting between Moon and Kim, in which we are going to declare that we will resume and start many of the old and new economic cooperation projects. And at the United Nations General Assembly meeting, with the possible participation of Mr. Kim Jong-un, then we will jointly declare the official end of the Korean War.
Yeah.
That was the original schedule, but it was stopped by a decision by U.S. President Donald Trump. So it is very necessary for Pyongyang and Seoul to resuscitate the momentum of dialogue and engagement between the United States and North Korea. So in that regard, that the summit meeting between the two Korean leaders this time actually served their purpose, tossed the ball to the United States and North Korea to have another high-level meetings. So we have to stay tuned and see what's going to happen.
Yeah, and we haven't heard yet from President Trump. I just checked; he didn't tweet about this yet, but it's morning in the United States on Thursday.
No, he did about the summit meeting that.
He did. I mean, he hasn't tweeted today.
About
it. So we'll see if he does. The U.S. will be reacting
actually,
to it.
you brought up a very important point. In the eyes of North Koreans, and to a certain extent, in the eyes of South Koreans, it seems like the President Trump is totally obsessed with the success of the agreements forged in the Singapore summit meeting on June 12th. But the reality is that North Korean issue is one of so many issues that a President of the United States has to pay attention to and make important decisions about. So it is a very important issue, pressing issue, but at the same time, it is not the only issue or the most urgent priority for the Donald Trump presidency. So one mistake, a misunderstanding that North Koreans must have made, in my personal opinion, is that they overestimate the potential preoccupation of President Trump with the outcome winning the midterm election in the first week of November in the United States. And it's North Korean issues relevance to the election result.
Sure.
The midterm election is very important for the Republican Party and the Trump presidency, but making a huge success out of this negotiations with nuclear North Korea will not really fundamentally shift the result in favor of the Republican Party or Trump presidency. So I think it was a strategic misunderstanding by the Kim Jong-un government, especially that of Mr. Kim Young-chol, the point man engaging in negotiation with his counterpart, Secretary Pompeo, that North Korea could afford to push the United States to the corner because the United States could not push back because they are preoccupied with, delineating a very visual success in negotiation with North Korea in order to use it in order to enhance the party's chance to win the midterm election.
When in reality, it's not really an issue that there's a huge
there is no
dividing line on.
There is no strong
right.
correlation as strong as North Koreans assumed. Good example is the appointment of Mr. Stephen Biegun as the special representative to North Korea. Now, the communication channel between North Korea and the United States, which used to be Mr. Kim Young-chol, the Vice President of the Korean Workers' Party and the Secretary of State of the United States. But now the North Korean affairs will be mainly handled by special representative to North Korea.
Indeed.
So North Korean have to restore the level of line of communication to the level of the Secretary of State.
That'll be important to them. And they will have a chance to do that possibly next week in New York.
Right. But it is very indicative that Mike Pompeo announced that he would like to meet Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho in the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly meeting. But at the same time, he did not forget to mention that there will be official negotiation to take place in Vienna. And probably Ms. Choi Sung-hee representing the Foreign Ministry of North Korea and Mr. Stephen Biegun, the special representative to North Korea.
Another thing to watch. Now, when President Moon meets Donald Trump, they will have a lot of things to talk about, things that only President Moon can really tell President Trump. There's nothing else they could say publicly yet.
There was a line of defense and response, right, to the criticism inside South Korea and outside that the Pyeongyang declaration is conspicuously lacking in terms of a clear, demonstration of will and intention and specific timetable by North Korean leadership about denuclearization. And President's Office National Security Advisor, Mr. Chung Eui-yong, and President Moon Jae-in himself emphasized that there is a lot of important substance that could not be contained in the actual letter of the Pyeongyang declaration. So as I said, that stay tuned. There will be more dramas coming, and you don't want to miss those dramas. But
Absolutely
we have to
not.
wait and see.
Yeah, we do have to wait to see. Several things on the calendar coming up. We talked about earlier the possibility of Kim Jong-un coming to South Korea, which would be historic. No North Korean leader has ever been to South Korea. If that happens, it could happen this year, according to President Moon. But in any case, Kim Jong-un said he would try to come as soon as he can. What would that be like?
So like you said, if it's carried out, it would be the first time that the North's leader has set foot in the South Korean capital since the division of the Korean Peninsula. And it's something that we probably couldn't have ever thought of last year when we were actually on the verge of war. All inter-Korean summits so far have either taken place in Pyeongyang or at the border village of Panmunjom like we saw in April. But we must note that Kim is not the first Korean leader to agree to come to Seoul. However, his father, late leader Kim Jong-il, also agreed to visit the South when he held his first ever inter-Korean summit with then South Korean President Kim Dae-jung back in 2000. But they said they are planning to make a visit this sometime soon, and it could take place this year. So today, after visiting Baekdusan Mountain, they said something on the itinerary could be visiting Hallasan, which is in South Korea's southern island of Jeju-do.
Wow, yeah, that would be sort of an obvious first choice, right? You go to the northernmost point in the peninsula and go to the southernmost point of South Korea. Imagine that, December on Mount Hallasan with the snow on the top of the mountain.
Well, there's a controversy or debate. I would say that whether Kim Jong-un can actually or will actually come to Seoul.
Is that right?
Before the end of this year, right? Think about the commotion or demonstration of deep division according to your ideologies when U.S. President Donald Trump was visiting Seoul.
That's right. We had anti-protests.
Right. I mean, the anti-protest or pro-demonstration times 1,000 will be expected if the leader of North Korea is actually present in the capital city of South Korea. There are three things that has a very specific date that are supposed to happen before the end of this year, calendar year of 2018. One is the official declaration of the end of the Korean War, right?
Yep.
Argued by both Korean governments. And the other case, which nominates end of the calendar year 2018 as a specific date, is the words of White House National Security Advisor, Mr. John Bolton, that North Koreans promised, we heard this from South Korean government, that they will either destroy or transfer 60 to 70% of all nuclear warheads, materials, and missile parts out of the country by the end of this year, 2018.
Now, has that comment been picked up, though, by other prominent United States officials?
Oh, definitely, right.
Yeah.
And the third announcement, which has a very specific date, which is the end of the calendar year 2018, happens to be President Moon Jae-in's word that, barring unexpected major obstacles coming, I invited Mr. Kim Jong-un to make a visit to Seoul before the end of the year 2018. Three things are supposed to happen before the end of this year. So we will keep watching whether all three things will happen, because these three things are not separate from each other. North Korea's willingness to move really fast and fundamentally with regards to its pledge of denuclearization is closely tied to U.S. willingness to accept North Korea's demand for official declaration of the end of the Korean War before the end of this year.
Yeah.
And
sure.
if that happens, or that's going to happen, then all these potentially hostile elements for Mr. Kim Jong-un to be in Seoul as a leader of North Korea will be smoothed out. If Kim Jong-un is going to come to Seoul, potentially also with U.S. President and President of China, and South Korean President will be the host, for the ceremony to declare official end of the Korean War, to declare that war is finally and fundamentally over on the Korean Peninsula, to take place in Seoul. Who can throw eggs and stones to Mr. Kim Jong-un?
Right, so for that scenario to play out, multiple things have to happen simultaneously in the process.
I agree. We're talking about extremely compressed calendar.
Compressed, it definitely sounds
That
compressed.
is why President Moon Jae-in said a few weeks ago that we have to rush, we have to speed up to create what he called irreversible peace on the Korean Peninsula. He really wants to lock everything before their momentum will be lost.
momentum may be restored today, may be restored, but as you illustrated in the point before, a few things derailed the original schedule that we had laid out for this year already.
Right. President Trump made it really clear to both Korean governments that you are not supposed to write the script without my consent. I will be at the center of the decision making to decide whether all these things will actually take place before the end of this year. As shown by his decision to stop Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to make visit to North Korea without any discernible gains coming out of another meeting with North Korean officials.
Indeed. Well, we're finally talking about the United States in the picture now after a few days. And as you said, it was the elephant in the room throughout this summit. But we cannot discount the achievements of the two Koreas over the past few days. We can look at agreements to make a peace zone, for example, along the demilitarized zone. A peace zone in the West Sea is another one, and to pull back some of the drills. Right, Minji, what can we say about what the two Koreas themselves have achieved?
That's right. So the two Koreas actually had a separate military agreement where it called for completely ceasing all hostile acts in every domain, including land, air, and sea. And these include designating no-fly zones for aircrafts above the military demarcation line, taking measures to prevent any accidental military clashes, as well as solving all military issues through peaceful consultations. And they said they will continue talks on various levels in order to achieve this. Others also include transforming the DMZ into a peace zone by removing guard posts within 1 kilometer of within each other and demilitarizing the joint security area. So some experts have said that this is almost close to declaring an end of a war because we've agreed to end the hostilities in that area.
It certainly sounds like progress towards the end of hostilities. And that's another one with deadlines on it. This work is supposed to start soon.
That's right. So some measures are going to start within November or October. So we have a timeline for these as well. So they are going to first implement some of the measures and gradually expand on them. Again,
it's agreements made by two Koreans. So exactly. Koreans like to, take actions fast and move really fast. But as President Moon Jae-in himself emphasized in his question and answer period with the reporters, I think this part, the military tension reduction measures, as a part of the Pyongyang Declaration, I think this is the most, biggest achievement coming out of this third summit meeting between President Moon Jae-in and Mr. Kim Jong-un. Although the focus was on denuclearization and the improvement of the inter-Korean relations. Why? This is pragmatic. Regardless of the progress or lack thereof, denuclearization talks between North Korea and the United States. This will help reduce the tension on the Korean peninsula between the two armed forces of North Korea and South Korea. So South Korea will not just stay idle while waiting for good news coming from the negotiation between Washington and North Korea. You got to start from doing something that is under your control. 2, it will alleviate the security concern of North Korea and will give strong and additional incentives for North Korean leadership to actively consider further steps toward the denuclearization. Why? Because North Koreans have used the hostile policy of the United States and South Korea as an excuse to maintain nuclear weapons and missiles as self-defense mechanisms. But if we succeed in reducing military tension across the DMZ, demilitarized zone, then North Koreans will have a weaker ground to maintain the same line of defense to justify their maintenance of weapons of mass destruction.
So South Korea is doing what it can do in the present situation, and that is not disconnected from everything else.
Right. And at the same time, I'd like to point out, especially to people who said that South Korea yielded too much to North Korea and fell into the trap set by North Koreans. But I think differently because, for instance, the decision to removed 11 GPs as a sign to reduce tension is a lopsided victory for North Korea, because North Koreans have approximately 160 GPs in comparison with 60 GPs held by South Korean armed forces.
That was the big sort of debate, is on what proportionality do you go with in reducing them?
But at this time, at least for this first try to reduce tension and to probe each other's true intention for to reduction of military tension, you can't really maintain everything should be absolutely done proportionally or in the same number. Because why 11 GPs as a first step? Because these 11 GPs are closest to each other. So they have the highest chance of the accidental conflicts, because the distance between the GPs of the North Korea and the South Korea is only 1 kilometer. So this is a very effective and necessary probing mechanisms to see whether North Koreans are serious about moving toward peace.
Well, indeed, and that's a good starting point on that front. Now, I guess we're at the end of 3 days of a lot of information to digest. I think the world will be digesting it over the weeks and months to come. Some particular points to watch. Obviously, next week, we might find out more as these meetings with the U.S. begin. So I want to say thank you, Dr. Bong, for being here tonight.
You're welcome.
And Minji, thanks for making time again.
Thank you.
Third day in a row. It's been a pleasure. Now, the third Inter-Korean Summit of the year is now over, but our coverage is not. Arirang News is the summit's official English language broadcaster, and we'll be back at midnight Korea time with more. See you then.